And welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Bears Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Will DeWitt. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Brandon Hazlett, and today is the first day of free agency, and we have a ton to cover. So here's a rundown of everything that's transpired today as of this moment, which is 4:01 p.m. Central Time. The Bears let go of Jay Cutler. The Bears signed Mike Glennon, Quintin Demps, and they look to be signing Deion Sims, the tight end out of Miami. Also, Alshon Jeffrey signed a one-year deal with the Eagles. So real quickly, let's start with the departures real quick. Jay Cutler, Alshon Jeffrey. Brandon, your initial thoughts?
I expected it. I don't remember when I said it, but I know I've said it before. I didn't expect Jay to be back, and I also don't expect Alshon to be back just the way he was talking about how he's going to let his agent figure everything out, and he did. And so, as a result, he's not here in Chicago. So, appreciate you both for your work here in Chicago, but it's time to move on.
It is, and it's kind of sad. Jay, I wrote a letter to him, put it on Twitter. I wasn't even going to tweet it. I just did it for like my own therapeutic purposes, and then I was like, you know what? Maybe other Bears fans would find stock in this. So I ended up tweeting it. Just how much I'll miss him and as a person, but again, it is time to move on. And Alshon Jeffrey, man, this creates a really big hole for the Bears now in a wide receiver, corps like now who? Ruben Randall, Cameron Meredith, maybe Kevin White. We don't know. This is Ryan Pace has his work cut out for him here. And it's really weird that Jeffrey signed a one-year deal with the Eagles. You would think if he was going to go out there and get some big money, it would have been some long-term. But yet again, he's on his third prove-it deal in 3 years. So good luck to him out there in Philadelphia. No hard feelings, no ill will. But again, like Brandon, you just said, it is time to move on. And let's move on and let's discuss some of these additions, players that we're going to be watching on the field come 2017. The future of this franchise, which I'm not saying is Mike Glennon, but he is officially the quarterback now. So let's talk about him. He signed a 3-year, $45 million deal, $19 million of which is guaranteed. He's the guy who only has 630 career passes, 11 in the past 2 years. So Brandon, let's go to you first. I want to know, what were your initial thoughts? Like as soon as you heard about this, what were you thinking?
A big capital N-O. No. Mostly because I wasn't sure what the deal was going to entail. Wasn't sure what their plans were with Cutler because when you listen to Pace talk around combine time, he said everything with Jay is fluid. I wasn't totally sure what that meant, but now that they released Jay, my thoughts have kind of changed. With that money, I wasn't, now that we know what it is, I thought that was kind of a big chunk for a quarterback who had more or less talent than Brian Hoyer did. So now that they released Jay, that same amount of money they just signed him for is open again. And I don't know, I'm not as upset about it as I once was. I'm more or less happy that the Jay Cutler era is over to move on with a different, I don't want to say saga, but a different era at quarterback, someone with a little more optimism, maybe a little more hope.
Yeah, and Mike Glennon might be getting a little bit too ahead of ourselves, but obviously he's going to be like a stopgap guy. He's no one who Ryan Pace, at least I don't think so, believes that it's going to be the future of this franchise. But when I first heard about the signing, my initial reaction was I felt okay. Like I wasn't jumping for joy, obviously, but I also wasn't like peeved. I wasn't irritated by it. And I'll explain why as we go on throughout the show. But let's kind of break down Mike Glennon a little bit. Let's talk about some of his strengths and weaknesses. And the first thing that always jumps out to me when talking about Mike Glennon is his size. He's 6'7". He's a one tall dude. He can play some basketball if he wanted to. 225, and his overall passer efficiency rating for his career is 84.6. What I like about him as well is that he stands tall in the pocket, no pun intended, and he goes through reads really well. He has arm strength to make most throws. Doesn't have the best arm strength, though, but he can anticipate routes and can throw the ball before the receiver breaks, which I really think that he and Cameron Meredith could actually end up having some really cool chemistry as we go out throughout next season. But Brandon, what kind of stuck out to you as something that he's good at?
He's good at, you kind of named off everything that I had listed as that he's good at. I like that he stands tall in the pocket. I'll have the pun intended that time. Just that he hangs in the pocket. That's something that, it was nice to have with Jay where he could move around a little bit, but it's also nice to see something different. I don't know how mobile he is per se. I haven't looked at
not much, man. Not much.
I didn't think so. I didn't look at him that closely as far as mobility, but I like that he stands in the pocket and he's willing to take a hit. So that was my big strength takeaway from him.
Right. He can, escape the pocket, throw on a run, maybe scramble, but it's something that he really does. It's not his strength by any means. It's really, he's slow. He's like a gazelle out there, just kind of like, limping along.
Takes a little while to get those long legs churning.
Exactly. No, he's a prototypical, what we would call a pocket passer. Not too much besides it, but something that we should note and why this kind of makes sense to a degree. And Ryan Pace talked about it earlier in, I think, January, how he was talking about the Bears' interior of that offensive line, sitting, white hair, long, is one of the best groups in the entire league. So for a quarterback like Glennon, who stands in the pocket, he should have a pretty clean pocket in front of him. So he should be able to execute and tailor to his strengths, as this season goes along. I really think that he's put in the system and put around players that he can succeed with. Succeed is a term I'm going to use loosely because it depends on what you would, coin it as. But for me, I think he can get, quote unquote, the job done, but he's not going to wow you by any means because there are some drawbacks from him. And I'll let you go ahead and start this one first. What are some things that when you look into Glennon that kind of make you go, eh?
The biggest thing with him, it wasn't his strengths, it was his continuing downfall of his completion percentage. He hasn't completed over 60% of his passes since 2011 when he was a junior at NC State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that really leaps out to me because that's something we've talked about with the combine is guys who are going to be accurate passers. Because Deshaun Watson in college has completed 67, 68% of his passes, and here is Mike Glennon down to 58-ish or so percent. And the last time he got significant playing time. So that was the really big major thing that stood out to me was, can he complete passes?
You know what's interesting about that? Looking at my stats as well, you're like about 59% of his passes. But where you would think he would struggle with that lack of arm strength would be the deep throws. But actually, it's in that 0 to 10-yard range where he's really struggling. He's only completing, or out through his NFL career, he only completed 54.5% of his throws within that short range. The NFL average, you want to take a guess what it is? He's completing 54.5. What's the NFL average?
From 0 to 10 yards?
Yeah.
Probably 64%.
73.3%. So
really?
Obviously he is struggling where other quarterbacks are succeeding in the league. So he really needs to start making those shorter throws in traffic to become a viable option, at least for a season or two. But
I did think it was really weird to watch some of his highlight reel, and a lot of his passes were coming like 8 to 15 yards down the field. So I wasn't 100% sure where his inaccuracy was coming from.
But now
that you point that out, that just makes so much sense.
No, it does. And another thing when you watch his tape as well is that he just, something about him, like something that Jay was really good at was like play action, especially early on in his Bears career. But something that Glennon struggles with is play action. He doesn't sell the fake well. He just kind of, half-asses it, to be blunt with my words here, but he just really needs to improve on that. At least I want to see it come training camp that he improves on that, because he needs to find a way to make defenders bite a little bit more to create bigger cushions in those throws for that. Like you said, something where he kind of excels is that intermediate passing game. In his time as Tampa, I think he was sacked for approximately once out of every 12 dropbacks. And a lot of those came off play actions because he was just kind of slow with it. They just knew he had the ball the entire time, and he really needs to change that moving forward. What else did you see in terms of his weaknesses? Because I have a few more.
One thing that I found in common, I don't know if it's necessarily a weakness, but one thing that I found in common with Mike Glennon in his significant playing time with the Bucs in 2013 when he played 13 games, that the team went 4-12. And in a lot of those games, they were within a play or so from having a different outcome, very similar to what the Bears have. And I know it's not necessarily Glennon's fault, but when he has the ball in his hands every offensive possession, he is the guy that could possibly turn things around. So maybe that's something that he's worked on in his time under Jameis Winston as a backup that maybe he needs to prove. I don't know if he has the ability to do that, but I think that's something maybe he needs to prove to himself that he can take the leap, just like the Bears need to take that leap in winning a couple more of these ball games.
Exactly. And one way where he can take a leap is really to improve his how he handles pressure, because he really, throughout his early part of his career, he has really struggled under pressure. When he had no pressure on him, he completes about 69% of his passes and has a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 20 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, which that comes out to about 111 passer efficiency rating, which is not bad. But then it all goes downhill as soon as he kind of goes under pressure. His completion percentage drops to about 43%, and his touchdown to interception ratio drops to 10 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, which to me just smells a lot like a taller version of Rex Grossman. They even wear the same number, but Rex Grossman, if he had time, he can make those throws. But as soon as teams figured out that you get some pressure on him and everything falls apart, that's when things get kind of dangerous. And that's something I hope Glennon can improve upon. But he's going to have, like we said, those three beasts in front of him of sitting Whitehair long. So he shouldn't have too much pressure, especially if the Bears can shore up one of the tackle positions as well. I'm trying to think. I think that's really it for all of his weaknesses that I have. Do you have anything to add?
Just that in 2013, again, he averaged 18 points a game. And compared to the Bears in 2016, they averaged 17.4 points a game. So I guess you could say there's a small lift in offensive production, but not a whole lot.
All right, so let's flip the topic here. I want to tell you something I really like about Mike Glennon, guys. I mean, it's something that maybe might go under the radar here a little bit, but what I really like about him is just how effective and careful he is in the red zone. I don't know if you saw this, but remember last year how just god awful the Bears were in the red zone. I think they scored touchdowns only 51% of the time. Well, 22 of Glennon's 30 career touchdowns came in the red zone, and only 2 of his 15 interceptions came down there. So that's a 22-2 touchdown to interception ratio while down there in the red zone, which is actually pretty darn impressive.
It is pretty impressive.
But let's talk about some of his fits here. What do you see him bringing to the table next year as a starter? Because we're all assuming he's starting getting this contract.
Right. I think he bring a good leadership style. From what I've kind of read on Twitter, a couple different sources have said that he has a good reputation around the league, and I think that's it is kind of almost totally different to what Jay Cutler brought, with a lot of negativity because he didn't get along with the media. So it's perceived that he wasn't a good leader. But with Mike Glennon having a good reputation, I think he'll bring. I don't know if he has the experience to be that leader, but he has the reputation of being a good guy and possibly being a very good leader to some of these guys, especially he's going to have to be under center. So I think that's something that he brings to the table, is his leadership ability. Yeah,
and for me, I think it goes to how I think he's actually going to fit really well in this system. As we saw, quarterbacks like Barkley or Hoyer, those kind of more pocket passers really excelled last year in Logan's system, and I really think that Glennon can do the same. I really think that because he's just really good and at his best when he's able to sit inside the pocket and just kind of climb it and then deliver the football, which I think he's going to have the ability to do so and the chances to do so with this Bears offensive line. So I think he can fit in this scheme quite comfortably, and I think he's a decent fit in this regard, which is giving me reason for hope, where other Bears fans are a little worried that he might not be able to win games, which I don't think Glenn's going to be a quarterback that's going to go out there and win you games if you're down by a couple scores in the fourth quarter. But I think he's a quarterback that's not going to lose you many games. He's not going to turn the ball over an enormous amount of times, give the opposing teams extra possessions. And I believe that's where the Bears might see this being a good fit, where they believe that this Bears defense, if they don't have to keep going back on the field over and over and over again, especially if they can shore up the secondary, which we're going to get to in a minute as well. I think they kind of see some complementary football, at least a more complementary football with Glennon back there.
Because, and to add to that too, real quick, something that I really want to see from Glennon is that he will not lose games. Just doing the fundamental things right. Like, I don't want the quarterback to lose games, kind of like what we've seen Jay Cutler doing over his time here, just throwing too many interceptions, being kind of careless with the ball. Cutler knew he had a big arm, and he used it and created sometimes too many turnovers. And I think with Glennon, as long as he does the small things right, does things fundamentally well, sticks to the system, I really think that he will be a guy that isn't going to lose us any games.
Exactly. All right. And just to let you know, Jay Cutler won us a heck of a lot of games as well.
Oh, I agree.
It's Jay Appreciation Day for me because it's all said and done. So no negative.
I'm kind of the opposite way. I'm ready to move on.
Yes. Let's talk about some expectations for Mike Glennon. Short and long term, what do you see him doing here in Chicago?
You've already said he's more just going to be a stopgap guy here in the short term. And long term, I don't really know. He hasn't shown me a whole lot in his NFL career to know what to expect long term. And depends what you define long term as, because he may not be here much longer than 2 years if they find the guy they want in the draft this year or next year. So it's
exactly.
Long term's kind of tough to gauge, but for right now, he's just going to be a stopgap guy unless he really proves me wrong and wants to be the guy that take over here in Chicago.
I mean, I've seen stranger things happen, but yes. I'm not going to hold my breath at all. But for me, again, I don't want to use the same term stopgap, but pretty much that's what he is. He's a guy who can come in, make some throws, take care of the football. He's not the guy who's going to go out there and just wow you with his arm, wow you with his playmaking ability. But he's a guy who's going to come in and be a low-risk type of player and get the job done. And I expect him to, to stick around as the Bears find that quarterback of the future. Just give him like a buffer, give that quarterback some time to groom, some time to develop, something that you and I are both all for, allowing incoming quarterbacks to develop.
Yep.
But again, yeah, I think that he's just going to be here for a couple seasons max for sure. But while he's here, what do you think his ceiling is and perhaps his floor?
Hopefully he's at his floor so that way he can rise. I'd like to see that completion percentage go up. So hopefully he's at his floor and his ceiling is to come. But I don't really know what his ceiling is because in really only 13 games, it's tough to gauge what more he can do. I don't have him in 2017 getting over 2,700 yards, if that makes you put in perspective where I think his ceiling is. So,
all right. So I know it's hard because we don't know who's even going to be lining up at wide receiver. But if you had to guess, touchdown to interception ratio for his first year in Chicago, what do you got?
I think it would be close to 4 or 5 to 1. He doesn't really throw that many interceptions. He just throws more incomplete passes. So I don't think it'll be very many interceptions on his part.
Yeah, as long as he can, take care of the football, we should be good. For me, going back to the ceiling and floor scenario, for me, I think his ceiling is like a top 16 quarterback in the league. And then his floor, it could be anywhere from, bottom 5, bottom 6, maybe, give or take. I think that's what we can get. He's not going to become a top 10 quarterback. At least we don't think so. And for me, he could end up, especially if he doesn't have anyone to throw to, like Alshon Jeffrey's gone now. So if he doesn't have anyone to throw to, he could be one of those tail end quarterbacks in terms of stats and just terms of wins, etc. So going through this, let's give the signing a grade. And I'm going to go ahead and let you go first. What grade are you going to give this?
To be honest, I really have no idea.
That's fair.
Just for right now, I'm going to have to give it a C+. I wasn't totally sure what the money was going to be. I kept reading it's going to be huge, and it's only Mike Glennon. But it's the same amount of money that they're releasing, or that they're saving releasing Jay Cutler. So I'm not too worried about it. I definitely don't think, as things are panning out, obviously, I don't think that this is the year the Bears get their quarterback of the future. So I'm not too overly concerned about Mike Glennon trying to go out and make huge expectations for himself and exceed them. So I'm just giving it a C+ for now. He'll just be another stopgap guy for me.
Yeah, pretty much. For me, I have it being a C in terms of like quality of the player, but maybe a B for the plan and action. So it kind of averages out to me about C+, B-, depending if I'm positive or negative on this. But like to some degree, I really understand the signing because I was sitting here mulling over, like, if I was Ryan Pace, why did I do this? And I understand it to some extent, at least I think I do, because if you went out and made that bold move by trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, giving up a ton to go get him, or by going and drafting one of these quarterbacks at number 3, then he's kind of putting all of his eggs in one basket, because if that quarterback fails, so does he. And by signing Glennon, he kind of just created a little bit of a buffer for himself. He got it where now he can draft a quarterback either this year or even next year, depending on who he likes. Or perhaps, it just allows that player to not be thrown into the fire right away. And it kind of lets some more time go on as Ryan Pace continues to build this roster. Because if you think about it, and if he went out there and brought in a guy like Tyrod Taylor, Colin Kaepernick, heck, I don't want to say it, but even like if you would have brought in like Tony Romo, there would have been immediate I know, but there would have been immediate pressure for him or the Bears to win with those kind of quarterbacks. So when you, in essence, it's kind of a good strategy when he's still trying to build this franchise for the future. Something else I want to note too regarding this. Go ahead.
Real quick, that if they brought in Tyrod Taylor, that it would be a win now situation, because I don't see him being much better than Mike Glennon, in my opinion.
Not a win now, but like
okay.
Not like that's what you're saying. Like win the division, go to the playoffs. But with Tyrod Taylor playing quarterback, I think they're expecting like 7, 8, 9 wins a season, which I think is understandable. But with Mike Glennon, nobody really knows. So I think if the Bears end up winning only 5 games next year, and I was like, well, we had Mike Glennon at quarterback. There's not like a lot of not a lot of pressure on Glennon to win as much as it would be another veteran quarterback, at least in my opinion.
Right.
And then going back to Tampa Bay, I've heard some people talk about like, if the Bucs really like Glennon, they wouldn't have drafted Jameis Winston. And I don't believe that, because the Bucs were in position to draft a game changer, a franchise changing quarterback, and they really could not pass that up. So I understand that one to a degree. But really, I think that overall, do we have a quarterback that's at least serviceable? Do I wish we had that quarterback of the future ready to go to take the field? Absolutely. But we don't really have one of those yet. And one of those things you have to be patient for, because you just can't go pick one from a tree. You have to wait until the chances are right, the fruit is ripe, whatever you want to say. So for me, I think we got a plan B in action here, and we're just going to let it pan out until we get that quarterback of the future. So for me, C plus, B minus, depending on which way you want to skew it. But overall, I think I understand what Ryan Pace is doing here by allowing him a little bit of a buffer in terms of not being married to a quarterback right away with whoever he brought in after the Jay Cutler era, especially if it would have been Jimmy Garoppolo.
Exactly.
Any final thoughts on Mike Glennon before we move on?
I think it's all kind of been out there. One of the questions that I had is, why didn't he play in 2015 and then realize that was your Jameis Winston was drafted, and then you explained all that anyway. So, I mean, really the big question was answered for me there. So I think we've kind of said everything on Mike Glennon. It's just kind of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, well, we're moving on. Let's talk about a signing another one that surprised me today. Quintin Demps, he got a 3-year, $13.5 million contract. He's a 9-year vet, and the Bears are his 5th team. And for those who might not know the name, he plays safety, and he last played for the Texans. So let's get into it. My initial reaction to this, I was actually kind of let down because I do feel a little bit better now. But at the time, I was let down to think that we're signing a safety that's 32 years old. And by the time the season rolls around, and then the last veteran safety we brought in, Antrell Roll, was a huge letdown. And speaking of which, he did tweet him today saying, call me, as soon as he said he's going to go to the Bears, which I'm sure he's probably going to caution him about the practice facility conditions, because we all know the story behind that and how he thought that the field led to his knee injury and why he has a little bit of a bitter taste in his mouth when it comes to the Chicago Bears. But what did you think when you heard about the signing?
I was pleased with it. I didn't know a whole lot about him initially, but when I'd seen that he came from the Houston Texans, I figured, he's going to be one of those guys that turns the ball over. And sure enough, he's got 15 in the last 4 years. So I was excited when I finally did the research on him, just because of the reputation that comes with that Houston Texan defense. So I was happy to get. I mean, I talked about my free agency post back in January, signing Darius Butler from the Colts. He's about the same age. He's actually a year younger. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of, well, I mean, he's 30. Does that bother you? I said, no, it doesn't bother me. I think we need that veteran presence to help give guys like Adrian Amos and HJQ that little boost to continue their careers, give them a little bit more to provide on the tank. You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I've seen that he's a really strong, locker room presence. So I really think that leadership can really help these young guys, because besides Tracy Porter, this is a very young secondary. So they really need to add in some of these guys who's been around, who knows the ins and outs of the game, and can really just, be a mentor to these young guys for sure. But when I see Demps, I see a versatile player who can make plays all over the field. And in case you weren't aware, you mentioned those 15 interceptions in the past 4 years is only one less than all the Bears safeties in that time frame had combined, just to let you know. But what I liked, though, I watched very little bit of film real quick because we know it just happened a few hours ago. But I like his short area burst. I think he has also excellent timing and the leaping ability. He's aggressive before the ball's in the air, and he has great tracking skills. And all of this really has led him to be a quality turnover specialist, which is why I think the Bears kind of brought him in as one of those guys who can go out there and change games. And he also has experience as a returner. I don't know if you saw that. He hasn't returned kicks, I think, since 2013 maybe. But even so, it does give the Bears another option perhaps. And really, anything to get Deontay Thompson out of there, I'm a happy camper.
Did you know he's taken 3 of them back to the house?
He has. Isn't that's pretty good as well. But
I'm not expecting him to be thrown into that role right away, but I just thought that was interesting as a possible option.
No, exactly. Like I just said, anyone besides Deontay Thompson, I'm happy, because that guy doesn't know when to take a knee. But another interesting fact about him is that according to PFF, he has gotten better each of the past 5 seasons. His grade's gone up and up and up and up. So I like that exponential growth that we've seen out of him. He's finished this year as Pro Football Focus's 12th best safety. And his grade has risen from a 50.8 in 2011 to an 85.2 last season, which excites me, but at the same time kind of worries me that his ceiling, his floor could be like a 50 grade player, which is, really towards the bottom of the barrel there. But he's improved each and every year, so I'm not really too worried. And I think that for me personally, I'm hoping he becomes like that next Darrell Freeman, but like for the safety, bringing in that veteran presence his game seems to be in the prime of his game and can go out there and put a really solid season together. What are some things that you like about Demps?
his ball hawking abilities, like I already said, he's got 15 interceptions in the last 4 years. And in that same time span, he's had 31 of his 44 career pass deflections in that same time. So he just is constantly around the ball. Was watching tape on him earlier. He had a fumble recovery. He scooped up for a touchdown. So it's just nice to see the guy that's always going to be consistently around the ball. He just has that knack to being there. So I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to. Is that something that the secondary kind of doesn't possess right now?
No, they do not. On top of this, did you know that he was the AFC Defensive Player of the Month for December? He ended last season on a real strong note. He had 4 interceptions in the final 4 games of the season, nice. Which obviously means he was playing his best ball as the season went on. So his play was or is, trending kind of upward. And last year, he led all NFL safeties with that career high 6 interceptions. Which led him to be, I think that's the second most in the NFL as well. So the Bears are really getting someone who seems to be, in the prime of their game, someone who is turning the ball over at an elite level, actually, in some, circumstances for sure. But obviously my one big worry is the age and the fact that he's never started a full 16-game slate. Do you have any worries when it comes to Demps?
I had age as well, but if he keeps progressing like he is and taking care of his body, like I think he'll peak towards the end of the contract that we have with him, the 3-year deal. The other thing was just durability because he hasn't hardly played all 16 games at all in his 9-year career. So what?
Exactly.
Oh, I thought you said wait.
No, I know. I said, yep.
Oh, okay. No, just the age thing doesn't bother me a whole lot. Just as long as he takes care of himself, I think we'll get the most out of him in these 3 years as he continues to progress, which is kind of odd at his age, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I have a hunch it'd be like this year, maybe next year. The 3rd year might be a bonus if he ends up still being
exactly.
well. When I think of this year for sure, he should be a solid addition. Next year, we'll see if age kind of takes a toll. But
frankly, even if he doesn't play every game, like if he misses game here and there, I think like HJQ or Deion Bush can step in and have learned under him enough to be able to fill in for a game or two, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's the big one too. Like Deion Bush is someone who I still have a lot of hope for, and I think that if he takes next year with no pressure of starting, he didn't have any pressure starting anyway. But if he takes that veteran, if he accepts the lessons that are going to be handed down to him, I think that could really boost his game. Because a lot of thing. I mean, the thing about a lot of starters is they don't really start right away and have long productive careers. I mean, it happens, but it's rare. A lot of guys do sit back for a couple of seasons and then they end up getting a chance and then they take off from there. So for, a guy like Bush, that could end up being his story, but we have to end up to see. But I really like the leadership that Demps is going to hand down. But what do you think are reasonable expectations for the 9-year vet?
I'm kind of keeping him around his average for his 9-year career, like for 18 interceptions for his career, 9 years. So that's 2 interceptions a year. I know it hasn't totally played out that way, but I'm going to give him 2 or 3 interceptions and a forced fumble, just like turnover numbers. I think he'll bring more consistency than the secondary has shown. There's times where the secondary is like, hey, they're doing all right, but then there's a lot of times where they're just playing inconsistently, and I think he's going to bring a nice, consistent playing style to the safety and secondary positions. Just that's something that the Bears need. I think that's a big part of what he's going to bring.
I think so too. And one thing I believe he's going to bring is like a calming effect back there, because last season, I mean, they might not show it or want to say it, but you got to believe that secondary out there each and every time was kind of, nervous, worried that they're going to give up the next big play or, not be able to contain their guy because it was just happening over and over again. But the guy who's been around the league as long as Demps has, I think he's going to just have a calming presence back there, which will really kind of let everyone take a breath. And then by doing so, I think they're going to be able to elevate their game. How much, I don't know, but I think it'll definitely boost the play of the guys around him for sure. But for me, what I'm expecting, I'm obviously expecting him to start over HJQ. Yep. And then with the age being a factor, again, I think I see him starting this year, maybe 2 years. We'll see how it kind of pans out. But definitely 2017. And if history is any indication, I think Demps is going to be that guy that's just going to be able to come in, make a difference, and give your offense some extra possessions. And hopefully in some crucial games down at the end of this, towards the end of the stretch like he did this year. But, the Bears need to win some games to matter in December. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But let's talk about grading this pick. What do you have this one graded at?
I actually have it as a B because it was a position in need. He's not a top tier guy, but one that's possibly flying under the radar because I know a lot of guys were looking at Gilmore and AJ Bouye, neither of which are coming to Chicago. But I think they roped in a very under the radar guy who's going to be able to come in and still be productive, give the Bears someone they can rely on back there in the secondary. So I think that a B is a fair grade. If he exceeds my 2 to 3 interceptions and a forced fumble, then this grade obviously gets an A. But right now I'm giving it a B just because I think it's a real solid signing.
I'm in the mix, like B minus area for me. Really for all the reasons you said. I think he's going to be able to continue his knack of creating turnovers. It started way back in college. He was the nation's leading interceptor. I think his last year at UTEP it was.
I believe so.
Yeah, and I think that it's just something that he's had the ability. He possesses it, and I think he's going to be able to apply it here. I think he's going to be a great fit for the secondary that was highly inconsistent a year ago. And I'm hoping that he'll play out of his mind despite being up there in age like Jarrell Freeman kind of did last season. But again, the age is always a risk. But for a small amount of money, I think he's going to be of great value. It's now time to just kind of wait and see what he can actually do, how much is actually left in the tank. But that's really what it all kind of comes down to. But overall, this really does help solidify and get a veteran presence in a position of perpetual need, which is something that we can't really complain about all too much. I mean, yeah, do we kind of wish we got a safety who's like, 27, 28, maybe not, 32? Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, if he's been playing, the best he has his entire career in his 30s, then by all means, bring him in, let him see what he can still do, which who knows, maybe the fifth time's the charm for him. But we'll see.
I was going to say, I'm kind of surprised how much the age thing is bothering you, it sounds like, because his production keeps rising the older he gets. So I think if we get, I think he peaks next year or the second year of his contract. Like I said, if he takes care of his body and continues to be productive, like he may not be peaking maybe on the downhill, but it may not come as fast as we think as long as he takes care of himself.
Exactly. I don't know why the age bothers me so much. It really might just be the intro Roll scenario.
That very well could be, and there's a legitimate gripe there. So
yeah, and Roll was someone who came in as someone who's supposed to be like one of the top safeties in the league at the time, and it just all went to poo. So It's just one of those things where I just get kind of I'm apprehensive about it, but at the same time I'm not really that worried because, like you said, his play has been getting better as his career's gone along. So maybe it's just something I have to get over, but right now I'm still slightly worried. I put it in like
you just got to see it to believe it. That's all.
Out of a scale of 1 to 10, I say I'm like a 4 when it comes to his age. So it's not terrible. Just
no. Made it sound like it was like a 6 or 7. But.
Well, I apologize for the there, but all right, let's move on real quick. Apparently the Bears are going to sign. It hasn't become official yet, but Deion Sims, the tight end out of Miami. So Brandon, I know you've did a quick research on him right before we went live. So what do you have on him?
I think it's another good signing. With Logan Paulson out the door with Brian Hoyer to San Francisco. I didn't really get to look a whole lot on him tape-wise, but so I really don't know what he brings. But he's 6'4". He's going to be a guy that I think can provide a really tall target as a fifth wideout if they decide to ever do one of those formations. Because we've seen Zach Miller do it before.
Right.
And frankly, I think Sims could be a guy that can step in behind Zach Miller when and or if he ever gets injured again. So I think he's just going to provide a good backup role to Zach Miller right now. And I think when he becomes integrated as more bigger part of the offense, we'll see his numbers increase because I was kind of surprised, but maybe I'm just used to Zach Miller reeling in 30, 40 receptions a year. But Deion Sims had 26 receptions for 256 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2016. So that kind of underwhelmed me, but I think once he gets a bigger role in this Bears offense, we'll see his production rise.
Well, those 26 receptions, those were a career high too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What I saw real quick throughout my research was he's known for being a better blocker than he is a receiver. Adam Gase, down there in Miami, actually was a big fan of him when he first got down there and really thought that he could become like the starter before they ended up trading for Julius Thomas. So, I mean, I think he has pretty good potential. And I still pretty much trust Adam Gase.
I think that's a large part of this signing too, is his potential.
Exactly. And I think that, Miller, we all love him, but we know he can't stay healthy for an entire 16-game season. So I think that he is a much better option to step in than, Daniel Brown, who they did resign. And nothing against Brown. I know the Bears are really high on him as well, but I think that, Sims would be a little bit a peg above Brown, per se.
Yes.
And it allows them to use 2 tight end sets without losing a lot. Because last year when Logan Paulson was out there, it just, I don't know. I felt
like we were losing a receiver.
Exactly. Like Paulson just didn't do too much. So I really think that Sims will be able to be that good number 2, allowing Brown to be that good number 3. And heck, we still got Ben Browniker hanging around too. Yep. So I still wouldn't mind if they drafted a tight end and see who won like in camp, like who ends up winning the position. But I feel a little bit more better about it now with the signing of Sims. So before we go, I want you to explain, how do you feel now that the first day of free agency, it's not officially over. They can sign 10 more players between now and midnight. I mean, let's be honest. But as of right now, as of 4:30 p.m. Chicago time, how do you feel?
I feel all right. I think the quarterback situation has a lot of people down. Kind of like, oh, what are the Bears doing? But I don't think they're going to get their quarterback this year, in all honesty. I don't. So as long as we keep building pieces around him and on the defense to continue getting better on other aspects of the ball, I think that the team will come to fruition. I think they'll win a handful more games, maybe. I don't want to make any predictions right now because that's a little scary.
Let's not do that yet.
Yeah. But I think they're headed in the right direction, especially with Deion Sims showing that they're looking for guys who are about to start the rise of their careers. And I think that as long as they continue doing that, getting guys who are rising in productivity, then they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, for me, I'm still kind of let down. I mean, Alshon's officially gone. We didn't get Gilmore. We didn't get Bouye. So we need to get I'll ask you that question in a minute, but we need to get someone, in that secondary, a corner for at least one of the better ones in this free agency class, in my opinion. Still, just kind of let down by the fact that we didn't really go out there and get any of those top names. But again, I can't control it, so it's just one of those things we just have to accept and hope for the best. And there's still plenty of time to put together a real solid free agency class. It's just weird that day one is Mike Glennon and Demps and now Sims. It doesn't feel like a day one, but I don't know, just let down still, but not overly let down. There's
still a lot of names that you wrote about in the secondary that are still out there.
That's very true. But I did say he needs to double dip in that secondary. So we have one dip down. Where's that double dip going to end up falling? So speaking of this, Tristan had a question. We weren't really officially opening up for fan questions today, as we're trying to keep this show a little bit short, even though it looks like we're failing in that aspect. But Tristan had one question. He wants to know, who's your number one free agent left up on the board? Mine's probably going to be Logan Ryan still. I hope the Bears can end up nabbing him. But what about you? Do you have a top guy in mind still?
Logan Ryan would be nice. I can hop on board with that.
All right, that makes it simple. But yeah, that'd be a good, nice double dip, in my opinion, at the secondary position. But all right, so yeah, the Bears, they signed Mike Glennon, the quarterback of the stopgap years here in Chicago, which seems to be 2017, 2018, but we'll find out. Also signed Quintin Demps, a 3-year, $13.5 million deal. And it looks like they're going to also sign a tight end out of Miami, Deion Sims. And that's just day one. That's just an hour and a half into it. So let's see how it all shakes out. But that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I want to thank you all who's watched live or listened to it on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and Spreaker. Don't forget to join subscribe to our YouTube channel if you like any of our videos. We're going to be back next week for a more in-depth discussion on these free agents, whoever else ends up signing as well. And, of course, our reactions from the Bears press conference whenever they end up holding one of those, introducing all these new players. But until then, bear down, Chicago.